Well, we have in the studio the Statistician General of the Federation and Chief Executive Officer of the National Bureau of Statistics, Adeyemi Adeniran, and at our offsite studios, we have the National Coordinator, Multidimensional Poverty Index, Sola Afolayan, to look at these issues. Thank you both for joining us on the news tonight. Let me begin with you, Statistician General. Ideally, it makes sense that the more people you have to contribute to growth and national development, the better for you. But it looks like in Nigeria here, the more we become, the higher the burden. Why is that so? When you listen to that report by our correspondent, some Nigerians think that the number of people they have or the number of children they produce does not have any correlation with the economic woes of the country. Can you explain why we have more people and yet we are poorer?
Thank you for having me. Let me first say that we need to put two things side by side. You look at the economic growth rate and then you look at the population growth rate. If your population growth rate is higher or is growing at a higher pace than the growth of the economy, it means that the government will not be able to provide facilities, amenities that will improve the living standard of the citizenry, because the resources that the economy is generating is not at pace with the population that we are having. The other one is that when we said the higher the population, we expect that we should have enough number of people that will be working in the country to generate income and then wealth within the country. As we all know, the productive of the youth in the country is not at its peak because of the kind of education system that we run, which does not give skill, vocational skill to our youth to be able to stand, be independent, to generate employment for themselves. We churn out graduates every quarter, every year, but these graduates are waiting to get employment from government, which is not there for them. So we keep on accumulating youths and graduates without commensurating employment that will absorb them. So when we have this kind of situation, then the teeming youth or the teeming population that we have that are not productive on their own, waiting for government to provide jobs, become a problem for the country.
Right, let's bring in Mr. Afolayan of the, he's the coordinator, of course, of Multidimensional Poverty Department. Help us understand, please, how a country that is so rich in resource is so poor at a point where the poorest, country, or in terms of having the poorest people in the country, now 133 million. How do we use the youth population, the youth bulge, to be the catalyst, to drive development, whether socioeconomic, political development in the country? I mean, the youth make up 70% of the population. No, let me actually get it right. 70% of the population is actually under the age of 30 and 42% under the age of 15. How do we use this as a catalyst for development? What do we need to put in place?
Okay, thank you. So in the first instance, I'm going to say that Nigeria is not the poorest country in the world. That is a fact, because the data shows us that. And we have what we call the Global Multidimensional Poverty Index, which is on the website of OFI, University of Oxford. You can check that out. Also, the one that we have done nationally, we have other countries that have also conducted the same. You can check out India, you can check out Colombia and the rest. So, but in terms of the population ratio of, I can call it the head count ratio, the result that we have today is saying that 133 million Nigerians are out live in poverty. It shows us that beyond looking at just the monetary terms, because we have 63% of Nigerians that are living in poverty. That's an equivalent of 133 million. But in terms of monetary measurement of poverty, which we have only focused on before, you can see that it's just 40%. So when we look at that, then we can begin to understand how can we use data to address unemployment, which is basically what we address in terms of the youth population. So it is data. So if I were to respond directly to your question, it would be using data to inform policy direction, to design projects that we can use to target areas where unemployment are more rife. So, and we have, like, it was launched at the meeting today at the same Hilton. Private sector have a big role to play in terms of, engaging the youth, and also using the kind of data that we have produced to engage youth. We have discovered that in terms of education, in health sector, in living standards, meaning in water resources, and also in electricity, there are opportunities where there are underemployment and lack of jobs that are there, where people can use the data that we have produced, to engage the youth population.
Thank you. Well, statistician, I mean, she read out the breakdown of the multidimensional poverty index used in this survey. But I know there's a school of thought that doesn't like to talk about the low-hanging fruit. But let me ask you, as a man who understands the numbers and how we can use them, what should take the priority if we are using this data to translate to our advantage? Which of this index should we be prioritizing?
Thank you very much. We can look at the dimension that are prominent across the state that put the citizens in this multidimensional poverty. One area that government need to focus on is health, because majority of the household that were in the multidimensional poverty bracket has no access to health facility. The other one is to look at the issue of fuel, that's living standard. The type of fuel that people use to cook, cooking fuel. Majority of the household, they are still using wood, using charcoal, rather than using clean energy for their cooking. So we look at health sector, we look at living standard, that's infrastructure as a whole, providing amenities and infrastructure for people to access can also lead to improvement in the life of the citizens. I think the other one that government need to quickly address is the issue of food security. Food insecurity is what the majority of the households that are in the multidimensional poverty also reported. Most of them don't have the right quantity and the right calorie and the type of food that can be nutritious for them to be able to perform, to be productive to the economy. So these are the areas that government can quickly look at and address by the ministry, department and agents of government that are in charge of these dimensions that I've mentioned.
Mr. Afolayan, let me also ask you, the gender parity is said to, gender disparity actually, is said to be one of the major factors. As a woman, I wonder what your take would be in closing this gender disparity and how it will improve the figures if we had to, go back to the figures sooner than later. And I'd also like you to address the issue of the poverty alleviation programs that this government has, put in place over time. We're promised under this administration that the government will pull out 100 million people out of poverty. What needs to be done to strengthen these poverty alleviation programs? Because it seems they're not reflecting on the figures we're seeing.
Okay, so the MPI survey that was conducted, we had intra-household disaggregation for gender. But we are launching additional research that will be conducted on that because we don't have enough data in terms of gender disaggregation, just to mention that. But what we have right now is just a few intra-household. We would have loved to do individual, but because of the constraint that we have in conducting the survey. So in terms of alleviating poverty alleviation programs that the government has conducted, so the government, I would say, has been quite sincere, not minding the peculiarity of this year and conducting the MPI survey, and also because of the intervention that they have that has been implemented since 2016, I would think, the NSIP, National Social Investment Program. You would see that the government had addressed household poverty. So you have the homegrown school feeding, that you have the mother as the cook, you have the father as the farmer. Then you have also the child, the graduate child that is on Empower, that is teaching. It's just a targeted household approach. And by the end of 2019, 5 million people had benefited, including the cash transfer. I'd like to tell of a story where we went to a particular community because it was very grassroots community-based approach that was used. And we had people, there was a particular woman, it's quite pathetic and quite solemn to talk about it. We would do a cash transfer of 5,000 naira per month, and she actually brought what we call Ghana Must Go, because in her lifetime, she had never held 5,000 naira at even a go. But people, the way people are deprived are, in terms of, disposable income, in terms of activities that the government has deployed, is something that has actually nipped poverty in the bud. But we can do much more, and that's why we wanted to understand beyond the monetary data that defines poverty. How can we understand how people are deprived in education, in health, in living standard, and also in energy? I'd like to also talk about, like, for instance, when we went on the field and we looked at people living in some riverine areas. When we asked them, they scored quite high in terms of nutrition, in terms of health. But when we look at energy, we discovered that they are energy poor. Why? Because some have not even seen electricity in the past 13 years. So those people never some people never identify those people as poor. But now we are seeing more, we are defining and changing perspective beyond monetary terms, income terms, for people to know that the basic things that you are supposed to be exposed to, if you are not exposed to them, that means you are poor. You can be energy poor, health poor, education poor, and then a lot of poverty deprivation. But in terms of the intervention that government is doing, is rolling out the different interventions and also gathering data that we use to implement, to design projects, and also use that same data to inform budgeting. I must say that for 2023 budget, for instance, out of the 20.1 trillion naira that we have, about 8.074 is for the high priority that the MPI has identified, and that will mean health, education, security, and also in terms of social protection. So government is using data to improve the current NSIP work that we do, and also in terms of future design of projects.
Statistician General, I mean, this is a home report. This is a Nigeria report, so there's no disputing the figures and the facts. But let me ask you, was there any part of this survey that was surprising to you? It's the most comprehensive we've seen on poverty. 63% of Nigerians poor. But going through that report, I also saw that children, for the first time, were looked at as well. We have a lot of poor children in Nigeria.
So that's the beauty of the multidimensional poverty index survey that we have done. Before, if you look at monetary poverty measurement alone, those households where the families or the household, the parents are well-to-do, the children will be classified as not being in poverty. But when you look at multidimensional poverty approach to measure this, you will see that the children that are located within the household that already fall in the multidimensional poverty index in the 4 dimensions that we look at are poor based on those dimensions. But this 2022 round of the MPI, we added the child multidimensional poverty index, which look at further indicators of children, just purely for children, immunization, childbirth, nutrition, severe undernutrition and all that, which are peculiar to the children. So by the time we added this child poverty to the national MPI that we already have, gave us additional children that are in the household that are poor, classified as poor, even though they may not be poor if you look at other dimensions in the national MPI. But when you now look at the child MPI itself, you are able to capture more children that are poor based on their own multidimensional poverty area, and then added to the national poverty, not national multidimensional poverty households. Then that increased the number of the children that we are able to capture for this round of the MPI. So that's the beauty of the multidimensional poverty. If we are looking at income alone, many of the children will not be classified as being poor. But when you look at their deprivation, you will see that we have more children now which are classified as poor. As much as 0 to 17 years children are about 70% of them are poor in the country.
And if that's predictive in any way, it almost paints a grim picture. But hopefully we can turn our population to an advantage for ourselves. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. Prince Adeyemi Adeniran, Statistician General of the Federation and CEO of National Bureau of Statistics. And of course, Sola Afolayan is National Coordinator, Multidimensional Poverty Index. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us on News Night.
Thank you.